chance?
Good.
Look at that.
I
Put me
don't.
in charge of all the computers.
You are so cool.
Nah.
Yes. How my husband adopted that, okay?
What's even on here for
Oh, I
us?
don't.
Yeah. Oh, then I probably don't. Well, yeah.
Backside.
I got this.
Yeah, well, so
I got a little thing.
Awesome.
It's 7:33. It's November 4th. We are at the Crow Wing County Historic Courthouse, third floor County Boardroom. I will call to order the Brainerd City Council meeting, and I would like to welcome all 24 of our YouTube followers who just received a notification. We are indeed streaming live on the internet. We will start the meeting with roll call.
Stunek,
Here.
Pritchett,
Here.
Bevins,
here.
Bedot,
Here.
Erickson,
Here.
Lambert,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Mink.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Lambert, a second by Pritchett to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next up is the consent calendar. Notice to public, all matters listed are considered routine by the council and will all be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the council votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion by Pritchett, a second by Lambert to accept the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
Bedot,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Next up brings us to our presentations. Before we get to the presentations, the city administrator, Thureen, asked if he could make a brief statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to take a few minutes, and I realize that my back is to our immediate audience here, but I want to say a very hearty thank you to a number of institutions or people, because we've gone through a very, very extraordinarily difficult week. We've made the move off floors 1 and 2 in City Hall, and we've relocated people on the 3rd floor, and it's been a big adjustment. I do want to thank Crow Wing County Administrator Tim Houle and all his staff people for the assistance that they have given us as we make this transition. Particularly, I want to say thank you to Paul, Sandy, and Sean Strong, and the people who have worked with them. And there are tens of people who made this happen. We had street crew, we had people from every office in the building involved in that major move of our offices. Things are now, well, I'll use the word cozy in the council chamber. You wouldn't recognize it if you want to stop in sometime. That's where you'll find, in perhaps someday, you'll have some people throwing spitballs at one another because they get a little irritated. But that's people. But they have, I tell you, it was laid out wonderfully, and people are saying we can live with this, and they will. So we're in good stead. The planning and the efficiency of making those moves was just outstanding. We had lots of people moving, lots of people loading boxes, and it worked out very, very well. So our new storage area for many of our records, although they're not required to keep, but not necessarily something of private nature, are now in what we used to call the sweat lodge. I don't know if you ever got there on the very first floor. But they're in there very well organized, and so again, I just can't compliment highly enough the staff and the people who have made this move possible. And we get to a new exciting phase of having our building completely redone so that it'll be 21st century ready in so many different ways. So I just want to really thank staff and our leaders for doing the great job they've done.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Yep.
That brings us to the next item, which are presentations. We have 2 presentations today, and the first will be the annual report from Northland Arboretum.
Good evening. My name is Vicki Foss. I'm the Executive Director of the Northland Arboretum. I'm going to ask my
delightful friend who just happened to be sitting in front of me to pass these to the council. This is a copy of our annual report. We had our annual meeting with membership on Saturday. Some of the highlights of the year, once you get your paperwork.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm sorry I didn't send this over. Oh, you're fabulous. I apologize, I did not send this over in a PowerPoint because we were setting up Winter Wonderland today, and it's really cold outside, and my hands stopped working. So I'm really proud to be able to pass this to you. Events hosted. We had several new events hosted this year, including a Veterans Pavilion dedication, which happens to be on the Brainerd side of the Arboretum. And it is there for people who are using the VA clinic. If they have extended, if their time at the VA clinic is extended by bad scheduling or that sort of thing, they are invited to come over to the Arboretum and use this Veterans Pavilion as a place of peace and rest while they wait for other doctor appointments or lab results and that sort of thing. It was built by an Eagle Scout, and it was dedicated on Memorial Day weekend this last year. So that's a really fun thing. We did run our last Sour Grapes race in June. We found that there are so many other races competing over the top of us that it was no longer fiscally responsible of us to continue using our volunteer space and our property in that way. But we did add a couple new things this year. We had the best haunted trail of our year. We added lots of education, best haunted trail of all of our years, I should say. We added some new education things this year. We're working really hard to tap our own trees and create maple syrup. We also have hives active on the Arboretum, and it's fun because I can have bees on the Brainerd side of the Arboretum, but I can't have bees on the other side. So we try to contain them to Brainerd. So thank you for loving pollinators.
Built a wall, or what is it?
We built a, no, we just speak highly to the bees and just tell them to stay on the Brainerd side. It's safer for them. One thing I'd like to highlight is the volunteer hours. Last year, or this year, we reported 3,388 volunteer hours, and that's the people that remember to sign in. Last year, we had 2,466, so a substantial increase in volunteers. And the value, according to independent sector value of a volunteer hour, is $25 an hour and some change. So our volunteers gave us $86,000 worth of time, talent, and treasure this year. Our memberships are up. This last year, on your report, you'll see our memberships are, there you go. I'm looking at an old copy. Apparently, I gave you all the good copies. 583 this year, which is up from 519, and that's the Duo Plus 2. We renamed our family membership because we had so many grandparents and families that were not traditional families, but they wanted to be able to bring grandkids when they came to visit and that type of thing. So membership is up substantially this year. And some of our other notable things that happened this year is we remodeled the Memorial Garden, so now we have a pondless waterfall, which, this is gonna sound crazy, but we have a lot less wildlife hanging out if you don't have a pond for it to sit in. So we haven't had a bobcat eating a fish for at least a year, so that's good news for us. We also expanded our size of our G101 gardens, where we teach children and their families and veterans how to grow their own food and prepare it. We doubled the size of our growing space this last year. We have a lot of new staff this year. We expanded the size of our haunted trail, and I was sent down to the World Halloween Expo in St. Louis, Missouri, and that was, I'm pretty sure I was the sanest person there. And we went through the CHAOS program, which is Certified Haunted Attraction Operator Safety. So we talked about things like fire safety, active shooter, lost child, that sort of thing. So our insurance company has approved this certification, and it gives us a break. And we feel a lot better about the product that we're putting out for our largest fundraiser of the year. And we upgraded a lot of equipment this year. We received a beautiful grant from the Geertsen family. We did survive a lot of vandalism this year. All of our vehicles were totaled out by vandalism over Labor Day weekend, as well as poaching on the property. And I just thank the city of Brainerd and the city of Baxter. Since the Arboretum sits in the middle, both law enforcement and the county responded to that and handled it beautifully. So we thank you for that. The last page that's attached is what we spent over the year. And we are grateful for the mill levy money that we received from the city of Brainerd, and that is very important to what we do, the mission of the Arboretum, which of course is education, recreation, and conservation. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, comments?
My last comment for you is you had an at-large member from the city of Brainerd that sat on our board of directors. That was Sue Hilgart. Since she has stepped down, I do not have a person from the city of Brainerd on my board of directors, so I would ask
We'll
that.
solve that tonight. Is that a mayoral or a council president?
As the council president.
We will appoint that tonight.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other thoughts, concerns, questions about the Arboretum? I invite you to all come out for a walk before it snows, and if it continues at this weather, we might be skiing by the end of the week, which is great for us. Yeah, stop it. I run a ski resort. Last year, we had about...
We're already at 400% of our snow plowing budget for 2019.
Yeah, so we had over 10,000 skiers come to the Brainerd Lakes area to ski the Arboretum last year. And when we did a rough poll of that, 60% of them were not from Brainerd. So they are coming to the area to spend money at hotels and restaurants and places to eat and drink. So I think it's a really interesting number. It is a really great attraction for this community. So go out and ski. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda. 6B is the Region 5 Children's Museum presentation. Name and address.
Yeah, my name's Peter Olson, and I'm the museum project director for the Region 5 Children's Museum. And Connie, should I just give you a little heads up when it's time to advance?
Actually, we can give you that little clicker there, and you can do.
Oh. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so thank you all for giving us a little time on the agenda tonight, our first time presenting in front of the Brainerd City Council. We really appreciate this opportunity to introduce the Children's Museum to everybody and to hopefully have a bit of a discussion with you all and leave some kind of thoughts to consider. So tonight, in quick order, I'll be very mindful of time here. I'm going to take you through a bit of a background on both the Children's Museum and some information we've been digging up on one of our potential locations, which could be Lum Park, I want to give a bit of an overview then of what that could look like and what some of the benefits of that could be, and then leave you all with some questions to consider. My name again is Peter Olson, and I've been retained by the Board of Directors of the Region 5 Children's Museum to lead the efforts to establish a fully functional, sustainable children's museum right here in north central Minnesota. And so who the heck am I to come in here and build a children's museum with you all? I'll give you just a little bit of a background. I have focused my career on opening children's museums. I don't think there's anything that can be more impactful on the vitality of a community and on the benefits it provides to children. I think children's museums are one of those just have such a high return on investment for what it does in terms of children's long-term well-being, what it does for unlocking their potential, and ultimately what it does for a community, for a region in terms of investment. So I most recently have come on board with Region 5 Children's Museum to be located up here. Before that, I opened the Children's Museum down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is called Knock Knock Children's Museum. You can see it up there in the upper left. Before that, I opened the Children's Museum down in Mankato, Minnesota, which experiences over 100,000 visits a year. And that's in a town of about 50,000 people. I'm originally from Otter Tail County. I grew up on a dairy farm straight west of here and still have a shack in the woods under the sugar maples that I spend as much time as I can, and that commute over here through Maplewood State Park and across Lake Lida and over into Crow Wing is just one of the most beautiful drives I can imagine. And so a little bit of background on our Children's Museum. It really started back in 2015 when Chad Coet of Sourcewell, formerly NJPA, the Regional Service Co-op, read an article about the Mankato Children's Museum. And he talked to Paul Drange, his director of public programs. They gave me a call and they came down to visit, and they said about all the hard work of getting a children's museum going up here. They brought a whole group of folks. I'm not sure if any of you were involved in that, took a bus down and visited the Children's Museum in Mankato. They convened a group at the chamber of area stakeholders to learn more about what a children's museum could do for the region. They did the heavy lifting of doing a master plan. They pulled together a planning committee of about 15 folks from around the region, including Kevin was deeply involved in that and is still involved today, and they hired museum professionals to come up with an incredible plan for what this children's museum can be. And the folks they hired are some of the best across the country. They hired me after I got Baton Rouge up and running. We'll have our first anniversary of convening as a full board of directors. We have with us tonight one of our rock star board members, Ellen Hagelin, who's our most recent addition, and we're so pleased to have Ellen's leadership. We've done all the work of forming the 501c3 nonprofit. And what brings us here tonight is right now we're in the thick of the site selection process. We're down to 2 sites on that. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with how this has been going, but the board decided to do a full RFP to keep the process as fair as possible because there's a lot of interest in where to locate the museum. We received 9 awesome proposals. 5 we thought were viable. About 9 people on the site committee did field trips to each of the 5 sites and interviews. The city of Brainerd proposed Lum Park, and that was one of the 2 now that we are really deep into looking at. And I'd like to thank Council President Gabe Johnson, Dave Bedeau, David Chansky, Tony Saylor, Jennifer Bergman. We've had a bunch of folks from the city that we've been talking with over many, many months and really seeing if this could possibly work. So here's our board of directors. You can see we've got just a great group of folks who are working really hard to make this possible. Out of that master plan, we came up with these really amazing concepts for tapping into the regional identity of north central Minnesota and creating learning experiences that just launch children's imaginations. You combine these fanciful, larger-than-life environments with hands-on learning that helps children to direct their own learning. There's no instructions, there's no playbook to follow, there's no immediate gratification like a video game. This is all about creating the disposition for children to be able to direct their own learning throughout life. And beyond that, it creates a regional sense of identity. So children growing up in this region know what it means to be from such a special place. Here you can see one thing I like to point out is our Children's Museum is going to have Minnesota's longest picnic table. And there's a spot for everybody at that picnic table. And not only does it run from inside the museum, it goes outside. So this museum is going to be really unique in that it's indoor and outdoor. We're going to make the most out of winter, too. So we've been really excited about the possibility of Lum Park. 1909, it's been around. It has so much history. It's been a vital asset to the community since its inception. You can see children have always utilized this park. Whenever I go there, in the summer anyway, you see kids out on the dock fishing or swimming. It'd be pretty cool to come up with some sort of make your own paddle boat contest. And tours around Rice Lake and up the river right from Lum Park with children could be pretty spectacular. Today, it is highly used. It has many amenities, picnic shelters, disc golf, playground equipment, which is great, but it could be brought up to snuff for the 21st century, and has RV camping. Of course, the loons are there. That's pretty special. There's sand, volleyball. I'm sure there's many other uses I'm not thinking of. And so when we think about the Children's Museum potentially being in Lum Park, here are some of the things that really jump out. We're combining the learning assets of a children's museum, those things that only a children's museum can provide in terms of these big built exhibits, these big built environments that launch imagination in these immersive environments that really support the development of skills, of 21st century skills, of communication, collaboration, critical thinking. We have innovative programs. What are those issues that affect families, that affect children? We can shine a bright light on those things. Children with sensory issues, we'll do programming to make sure that children on the spectrum are able to participate. Families that military families, making sure that military families are able to access the museum. There's making sure that there's access for everybody, children who can't afford to attend, making sure we have subsidies. With Sourcewell's support, we envision having something really innovative called the Teachers Center for Interactive Learning. And that's where we can make the Children's Museum a living laboratory for educators, for teachers from across the region, where they can come in and learn how to bring play into their classrooms. And also, with Lum Park as a location, we can make this children's museum not only, all these incredible assets that the Children's Museum brings, but tie that to nature and recreation in this really special environment. And to do that, we'd pull together the Nature Play Institute, where we're bringing together the best practices and really innovating on how children can learn from nature within nature. And there's so many benefits. I've just listed a few up here, but think of all those collaborations and partnerships that could take place to really make the Children's Museum at Lum Park a catalyst to make it relevant for families. Here you can see Lum Park, 40 plus acres, and that it is fully connected to the grid, to the street and sidewalk grid, really close to trails, right on the lake, and easy access to downtown. I'm going to invite Ashley Martell from WSN up in just a minute to further go into this, but we took the liberty of placing a potential site for a museum within Lum Park just as a starting point for a discussion to show that it could fit within the museum or within the park without disrupting the current uses. what we found, what WSN found for us, is that a 25,000 square foot foundation could fit pretty good in the park. There'd be room for daily and event parking. There's the potential to retain all of the current amenities, potentially upgrading the ones that need it. Connections to infrastructure, including water, utilities, it's all right there. Street grid and trails, as I mentioned, are super close. So, why I'm here today is just to ask a few big questions. One is, do you think that the Children's Museum could fit in Lum Park without taking away what we already love about Lum Park? Would you be interested in this sort of revisioning of Lum Park for the 21st century in a way that it can even better serve the current users, but also add all these new users to Lum Park? If you think about it, our business planning shows we can expect at least 40,000 visits a year, and then all these educators from around the region coming as well. And then, to take this further, would you be interested in being part of some sort of joint planning process where we work with some professionals to help facilitate a discussion between you all, whoever you want on that committee, and with the Children's Museum to come up with where would the Children's Museum fit in the park? Are there additions to the park that we're both interested in and want to take on? Are there things we want to upgrade? And then really, this is a big one, but what would the relationship be between the Children's Museum and the city? And having a process in place where we could talk through all those aspects of coming up with what that public-private partnership would look like. And to be able to do it in a way where we're engaging the community. Not, of course, our nearest neighbors in Brainerd, but we would really love to be able to pull in the region on this. And in fact, we're applying for a grant that if we did move forward with the Lum Park site and with you all, that would give us some support to be able to bring the engagement out around the region. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need this?
Oh, thank you.
Hello, I'm Ashley Martell. I live in Baxter, and I'm with WSN. As Peter kind of alluded to, and you kind of saw a preview of, we put together an image, because it's hard to visualize something, whether it can fit in a space until you have a visual. So just something to see whether it's possible that these two pieces could coexist together. To start, we looked at the history of Lum Park. Lum Park was donated by Mr. Lum so that children and women and children and husbands and families could have a place to go where they felt safe and they could have recreation with the water and the land. And as you can see from this image, it has been a flourishing place of activity in its history. You can also see that this historic structure was donated by Mr. Lum's brother for remembrance of him. And currently it's just kind of setting out in this open grass area. There's no connection, but you can tell from this that it once was the major entrance point to the park. And as you can see, as Peter mentioned, the park itself is right in this awesome location. You can come down the river, you can go through Rice Lake, you can be at the park, and then you can portage across the dam and come all the way down to the riverfront, where the river community is looking at putting parks. There's a direct connection there. As mentioned, it's walkable, it's bikeable, other initiatives that the cities have, and it's got right on the connection to the Cuyuna Trail, so there would be possible connection there as well. As you can see, this is the existing park. The entrance, how the main entry arch is kind of off in the grassy area. You can see the campground far up in the right corner. It's in this open clearing. There's not many trees, but yet there's this beautiful treed area right next to it. The terrain is pretty flat towards the left, and it's also flat towards the right. There's a little low area in the middle. But when you're walking the site, that upper right corner seems to be a great location for a facility. We then looked at what we could do in that area and whether we'd have to disrupt parking or how that would work. This is an image of something that was 25,000 square feet and how it could fit on the property without disturbing any of the parking. Currently, there's utilities running along Wonderland Park Road for sewer, water, three-phase power. So something up in the right corner works well with that. There's also direct connection to the water. There's no better way to learn than having something so close to the water. And with the theme of lakes and woods in the Children's Museum plan, you could really nestle it right into the woods and have that connection between actual woods and structural woods. You could reuse the existing parking, as I mentioned. There could be potential for overflow parking over by where the existing Parks and Rec buildings are. We are currently working with the Loon Center, and right there, that's a park and a museum going into the same location. And they are just reusing the existing parking there. What they're proposing is to use unused parking in other locations to fulfill the needs of high demand hours and peak times. That could be the same situation here, and it's not much difference from where the existing Parks and Rec location buildings are to the Children's Museum, as if you're pulling your boat in and you're going to the dock and then you drive up and drop it off. It's about the same distance, and it could be a great scenic walk. It really brings you through the woods. Is it possible to show the video? No, okay. So there's a quick video that we put together, where you can wind the path through the trees and you have this really scenic, relaxing walk. With the park having areas and locations where you could have outdoor activities, you could have, as you can see to the right to the building, there's a bucket with some creatures, worms, with this idea of you have a little bait shop that the kids could go out and dig worms in there. You could have all these different activities throughout the park that would be enhancements to the park. It could be inclusive playground equipment, it could be learning opportunities, and the difference is you could experience it as just a regular park goer, or you could experience it differently by having a membership and paying to go to the actual Children's Museum. Also just showing how the trail could wind through that existing stone structure off to the left-hand side and then connect to the trail if that comes along 210 like it is hoped to. This is showing that where we put the building currently is in that open area, so we won't have to disturb the trees because the trees are such a wonderful aspect to the park that potentially we could maybe move the campground off into those trees so that you have a little bit more seclusion. It's more of an inviting place for a campground. And by doing that, we could have an entrance to the camping area off of where the Parks and Rec building and storage facilities are. And then those existing buildings could potentially be repurposed for items like a check-in for the campground. The existing storage main building could be a recreational area for if it's a cold, rainy day where you don't want to be outside. And that would also decrease traffic that goes along that main road through the park. This again just showing new entryway. You could reuse that for signage or walkway through there. This is also just showing those different activities, whether it's inclusive playground, whether it's little excavators showing them kids how to build a road, whether it's the mechanisms of a wooden boat, or a giant play piece that feels like you're in a bucket of worms. All that could be right there, and that connection to the water, just working with what already is and fitting on the site right next to utilities without changing anything, and they can coexist together with that, and showing how the woods can be right nestled in with the building. Whether there is also opportunity for a farmer's market or that endless picnic table, and having a central core where it's open to the public. You could have those Children's Museum paid for things in other areas, but maybe you have that farmer's market and those central utilities, whether it's bathrooms, shared offices, that could all be accessed from the public, and you wouldn't need to pay admission in this facility, which can help improve the park. There's buildings on the park right now that are in need of repair, maintenance, and that would help deter that. Maybe they can move into a new space or not be a maintenance item anymore. Again, just showing connection to the woods and the water and how you can delineate maybe the architecture of the front to blend in and not feel so big or so tall in that space. And that's that. Any questions?
Any questions? So Peter, you addressed the questions you had right before Ashley gave her piece, and that's, you kind of want to know if we have, if we like what we're seeing, if we feel that the Children's Museum and Lum Park can coexist together.
Yep.
If the city is interested in sharing the financial obligation of kind of a co-master plan
Yep.
between the Children's Museum and a master plan for Lum Park itself.
Yep.
And what, was there another piece to that?
Well, I'd think if you all were interested in investing in some sort of planning process, work with a park planner to help really think through how could the Children's Museum fit in Lum Park. How should we address some of these other amenities that exist in the park that might need to be upgraded? Like Ashley mentioned, there's some things that the Children's Museum might want to do that the park might want to do as well, around like accessibility playground equipment or things like that. But having a process to really talk through all of those, opportunities, and do it and then have a process that leads to us being able to fundraise for it, and be able to build up through community engagement just this amount of excitement to get everybody on board about making it a reality. And then Council President Johnson, I think to your point too, that like having a spot in there to talk through what would the lease agreement look like, or what would the covenant be to have that type of public-private partnership with I've done that before down in Baton Rouge. Knock Knock Children's Museum was in the parish park, in the county park. And we had a cooperative endeavor agreement, a 50-page legalese document laying out every piece of liability and responsibility. On this one, we'd have to add in who's doing the snow plowing. We didn't have to do that.
And do that in
Baton Rouge.
Louisiana?
So yeah, that's, I think, one of the big questions that we're bringing to this is, would the council be interested in investing financially in 2020 in that master planning process?
In 2020, in this year's budget cycle.
Yep, yep.
Any thoughts from anybody, or should we just toss this over to PNF and the park board and just tell Dave Boudreau to
Yeah, basically that
get
all
it figured
falls on
out?
me then.
Because we'll definitely need park board input on just major changes to the park itself. But then, as far as going into the 2020 budget, I think we'll need to run it through personnel and finance. And I think we're setting a budget workshop tonight, right?
Yes.
You'll set a date for one tonight?
Yep.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may say, I think would be a very good investment in our city, and I think I appreciate you guys going through this. And it would be nice to work on a private public venue. I think it would be very beneficial for our city and for the region, but it'd be very beneficial for our city.
Great.
And that's who we represent, so.
Yes.
so
And Joe, you're going to have to review the 50-page document because
Yes.
I'm not. 30 pages? All right, we'll do it. Any other comments or questions? No? Well, thanks for the presentation, Peter.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is number 7, council committee reports. We'll start with the Safety and Public Works Committee. Alderman Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 4 agenda items. The first item, number 1, is a request for an event application for a 5K for mental health awareness to be held on May 9th, 2020 around the Central Lakes College campus in Boom Lake. We do have a staff recommendation and approval of this attached event application. Pretty self-explanatory. And the motion is to accept or to approve the attached event application, and I so move.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our second item also a request for an event application for the Hometown Holidays Santa Stop and Tree Lighting to be held November 30th, 2019 from 11 a.m. until 12 p.m. in the Laurel Street parking lot and 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the City Hall parking lot. We have staff's recommendation to approve the event application, and the motion is to approve the event application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, item number 3 is a request for a change order for improvement 1706, 1707, 1805, the 10th Avenue Northeast and 8th Street reconstruction and 8th Street sidewalk improvements. We do have staff's recommendation to approve the attached change order. Maybe Engineer Sandy, you want to hit the highlights on this one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, if I may. There's multiple parts to the change order, a lot of them that have to do with water items that were either changed or added during the construction project. The part 1 is the change in the completion date to June 15th of 2020. As you may recall from the Safe Routes to School project kind of being pushed back due to our bidding process and the having to award it to the second lowest bidder, that we had to do some work that was part of the Safe Routes project on our H and 10th project, which inevitably pushed the construction back a little bit. We had a few items that are outstanding that we're still working on those projects, so we're recommending that we do look at that part 1 of the change order here. There was some unsuitable material that was removed as part of the project. That's item number 2. There was a few hydrants that were either added to the project that are basically just a part of the BPU portion of the project. We had a deduct for the bituminous finish of the surface that we were recommended by our engineer, SEH, due to some surface, I don't know what the word is, we had some segregation issues in parts of the mat that we had a deduct on. So as you can see, if there's any questions, I think Scott's here too, if there's any specific questions about the change order itself. So total change order amount, $9,355.88.
Mr. Chair, the motion is to approve the attached change order for the listed improvements in the amount of $9,355.88, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just an FYI, some of the change order will be eligible for state aid funding, as well as some costs are attributable to BPU.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you. And our final agenda item is the final pay application for improvement 19-13. This is the somewhat of an emergency southeast sanitary sewer interceptor project down in the pit. The motion is to accept staff's recommendation, approved the attached final pay estimate in the amount of $123,300 to Tom's Backhoe Service, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just again, a little bit more information that the project was approved to be taken from the Sewer Accessibility Charge Fund, SAC, and there was a slight overrun on this project, a couple $1,000s, where we had to remove some supporting boards under the original sewer and replace it with sewer rock. So, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
End of report.
Thank you, Alderman Bevins. That brings us to the Personnel and Finance Committee. Alderman Bedeau.
All right, we have 6 items on our agenda tonight, the first of which is the approval of bills and payments to contractors, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Bevins.
Yes.
Bedeau.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Lambert.
Yes,
Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries.
All right, number 2 is the police officer resignation and request for hire. The motion coming out of the committee is to accept Officer Free's resignation with regret and authorize the Civil Service Commission to establish a new police officer eligibility list, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So, Officer Freeze has accepted a pretty sweet gig, as the kids say, with the FBI Hazardous Device School, and we are regrettably, accepting his resignation. The problem is, it's probably going to take a little bit of time for us to get this next officer up and running, because we've exhausted our eligibility list. So, it'll be a slight process, but
Question, I'm going to assume he was on our bomb squad. Yes. Do we have somebody to replace him, or is our new hire going to replace that position?
No, we'll have to consider if that's really in our best interest to continue with that position.
Oh, okay. We didn't keep him too busy with it, right? No, don't talk about it, okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That
All right.
motion carries.
item number 3 is the City Hall remodel, network cabling, and door access control security. This is a continuation of the other items from City Hall that we had. The motion coming out of committee, there's 2 parts. To approve Digital Horizons cabling quote for $16,330 with an additional $3,500 of city-provided hardware, and to approve Midwest Security and Fire access control quote to add 16 City Hall doors to our existing system for a cost of $41,513 at a total cost of $61,343, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
So
Oh,
this is the cabling part of City Hall, running the cables, and it appears, from what we're hearing, to have come in substantially lower than what we believed it was going to, as in many, many dollars less.
Dozens.
Dozens. Dozens and dozens.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Midwest Security and Fire out of Brainerd.
I believe so, yes.
All right, and I'll be voting against this. I've had experience with this company in the past, and it has been nothing but bad. So I'm going to vote against it. Just on that matter, I just can't.
Okay, any other discussion? I have one question. I'm glad it came in many dozens of dollars less than we expected, but how much less? I'm kind of, as a total picture of the City Hall remodel, we budgeted 1.7. A lot of the contracting work came in around 1.1. We're adding 60,000. Do we know where the soft costs are coming in? Do we know if we're under 1.7 still?
We should be under the 1.7 yet.
Well, we should be. That's what we budgeted. Do we know if we are?
That's a finance question, but we were expecting this to be at least 120 to upwards of 200 at the most, and to be at 61.
Oh, so we
Yes.
might be related?
Yeah, so when we were originally talking about the City Hall projects, we had planned for about 120,000, and we were going to include them as part of the bid package. Upon examination, we decided to keep all of those things separate because it not only gives Sean a chance to work with the contractors on the site to help them with where things are going and stuff, but it also wasn't our best benefit because we'd get better prices. So we did quote those out separately, and it was about 120,000 that we originally thought this would cost.
And it looks like it may have been wise, based on the bids that came back, to
Correct.
bid it out separately. But our bid package and our budget are 2 different things.
Correct.
Are we staying under the budgeted amount?
Yep, that 120,000 was part of the original 1.7
Okay, so
million
we
or
had
whatever.
1.7 at 120 for this
Correct.
portion, and we got
Yep.
bids back at 60. Well, that seems good enough for me. Any other discussion?
So the only other thing they wanted to note was that the cameras are not a part of this. The cameras were part of our previous budget. So this is the wiring.
Okay, so we may need some new cameras. Might want to talk about that. Alderman Bevins pointed out that these are some pretty nice microphones. Might want to look into these microphones too. But we'll figure all that out before May.
Need a Phillips screwdriver.
And I
Fine.
can say what. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Okay, item number 4 is deferment of assessments. So we have two items on here. The first motion coming out of committee is to approve the deferment of assessment PID 41191702, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Just the second piece, just for information, is that the second applicant, 41191721, we have directed staff to work with the applicant on some further information and come back at the next meeting, which should still give us enough time to either approve or deny that within the deadline. But there was just some questions we had, and we wanted to make sure that there was ample time as we were running a little late downstairs.
Okay, and we do have enough time to get that certified if we can't defer?
Gonna be on the next meeting.
Yep. So no action?
All right, and our next item is, let me get down to it here quick. This is item number 5, the parking lots update. So the motion coming out of committee is to table the discussion on pricing and incentives for the parking lots until the budget of, the budgeting process of fall 2020. Then I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Basically, our discussion downstairs was that we have just adjusted our rates. And we want to take a look at it a little bit more, just to see how it continues forward. Obviously, we're at 100% now on all of the lots, but with Maple Street having the school district and their issues there, and perhaps even some of the other ones, we figured right now, we just adjusted it, we might as well let it go for a little bit, and then come back in the budgeting talks when we want to talk about if we're going to raise it or not raise it. I think that gives us a little bit better picture of where we're at.
So to clarify, fall 2020, you're talking the 2021 budget.
2021
So calendar year 2021, we'll look at where we're at with the parking lots. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, was that a motion?
I mean, technically, we're tabling it, but we made a motion.
Oh, well, you did motion to
We
table it,
directed
did you?
staff. The motion was to direct staff.
Okay, yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
All right, and lastly, more budgeting talk. This is the, oh, no, I'm too far. This is the 2020 Budget and Levy Workshop. The motion coming out of committee is two things. One, to have the non-working funds that the city adopts as official budget be presented for discussion during the next PNF meeting, and then hold a workshop on Monday, November 25th for the remainder. And I so move.
Second.
I was typing into my calendar when you were talking. Could you restate the motion?
So basically, just in order to move things along as quickly as possible and not take up as much of the council's time, the non-working funds, we're going to go ahead and put that on the next PNF meeting so we can get through all that stuff. And then the actual workshop date that we decided on downstairs was November the 25th, Monday,
Okay, so
at 6 p.m.
Monday the 25th at 6 p.m. And at your next Personnel and Finance, you're going to handle hydrants and all
Yep.
that. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
End of report.
Thank you, Alderman Badeau. Oh, I'm dying here. Next, yes, please. Thank you. Unfinished business. Next up, public hearing and resolution improvement, 1706, 1707, H Street and 10th Avenue Northeast. Contested assessments. Engineer Sandy, can you introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So, as you recall from the last city council meeting, we had pulled a few of the assessments related to street improvement project 1706, 1707. Those are the 8th Street and 10th Avenue Northeast construction projects. I listed some of the information. We heard a little bit of the testimony at the previous meeting, and then we adjourned the meeting to this public hearing. So the contesting parties will again have the opportunity at the hearing to propose testimony for or against the proposed assessments. There were 4 of these assessments which we pulled that can be seen listed in your council packet. One of which that you, I believe, adopted as part of the deferment criteria. Well, that was PID 4119-1702. One of which is being held over, I believe, into the next meeting to make a decision on. That was PID 4119-1721. Just a little brief summary about how the assessment rates were calculated. When we do a construction project, we are, by statute, we're made to send out a preliminary assessment calculation based on our engineer's estimate at the time. When we sent out the notices for the 10th Avenue Northeast and 8th Street project, we had calculated preliminary assessment amounts of $61 per front foot on the 8th Street project and $45 per front foot on the 10th Avenue Northeast project. Our assessment policy is to assess based on what it would take to construct a typical residential street. That is a 32-foot wide bituminous surface at what an engineer would call a 7-ton road design. That consists of our 2 inches of bituminous and 4 inches of gravel. That's what these 2 assessment rates that were proposed on the final letter that the residents received. There was 2 assessment rates proposed, one on the 8th Street project, which was $62.33. And on the 10th Avenue Northeast project, we had a proposed assessment rate of $57.21. As we indicated at the October 21st meeting, the increased cost at the time of the bid opening is the prevailing reason why the increased rates are on both projects, and most significantly on the 10th Avenue Northeast. And as I've stated previously, the council is the final determinant on the assessment rates based upon the testimony you hear tonight. And at this point, you can go ahead and open the public hearing, and we can hear testimony from the public regarding these projects, and we can answer any questions that you guys may deem fit.
All set. With that, we'll open the public hearing on improvements number 1706, 1707 for the contested assessments. Is there anybody here to speak on their contested assessment? Please come forward.
Grab the clicker. Paul. Grab the clicker from the podium. Could you grab the clicker from the podium?
My name is Jean Johnson. I live at 815 10th Avenue Northeast. And before I go any further, I'd like to make a correction in the memo that was distributed to you at the last council meeting. In the first paragraph where I said the very same street with regarding 1706 and 1707, that was an error. I should have said neighborhood. So I just make mistakes. So for tonight's adjourned hearing, 1707 and 1706, those separate and distinct projects are in the same neighborhood. The percent changes in their total costs and in their assessed costs are also...
Gene, can you speak into the microphone? We're having trouble hearing you up here. Well, maybe don't look at these mics. Something similar, though.
Yeah, thank you.
The percent changes in the total costs and in their assessed costs are also separate and distinct. And I can give you those numbers, or maybe you have them, but I'll give them for the record. In total, for total costs, the percent changes from spring to fall were for 1707, 21.3%, and for 1706, 3.8%. The percent changes in the assessed costs in the same time duration were for 1707, 26.9%, and 1706 was a decrease of 6.7%. Now, if I've made errors, I appreciate if people would call them out. I have my book of where I got the numbers from, and I know exactly the techniques that I use to generate my numbers. But if they don't make sense, you know, my argument hinges on these numbers. So if you see a problem, then let me know. These four numbers are not clustered around a purported 20% industry-wide cost increase. And so they're not clustered at all. So the proposed rate for the 1707 properties went from $45, as Paul Sandy just said, to $57.21. I described this as unexpected, unexplained, and discordant with the values for 1706. And so I'm going to give you the background information that prompted that description. The 45%, or prompted me to write that. The 45% rate was initially described to me as possibly, or not possibly, as probably an overestimate. I have references for these things, but I'm going to leave them out in the interest of time, but if you want me to read them, I can read them. And that was back in March. More recently, the $45 estimate was described as 9 out of 10 times in the range for a project like 1707, and it was the final assessment might be less. Those aren't the exact words. I don't know exactly what was said, but that was my understanding. So that's one reason, the way it was initially described as an overestimate. Second reason is none of the 4 SEH project updates gave even a hint of any supply-side problems, any price increases in general, or any significant construction-wide cost increases in the specific aspects of what would be used. A third reason is in contrast to 1706, none of the 1707 Anderson Brothers 5 contract pay requests indicates any revision from the original contract amount of $352,724.68. The Anderson Brothers' original contract amount is closer to the Brainerd spring estimate of $322,000 than it is to the Brainerd fall estimate of $390,723. So, and the fourth piece behind this attempt to say why the assessment adjustment is not warranted is that inflation through this time has remained low and stable. So I have a couple of questions, and one of them is, the assessment for 1707 increased by 27%, and for 1706 decreased by 6.7%. Is that fair? I mean, the absolute numbers are different for the different projects, but what is behind that wide difference in the same neighborhood for two street assessments? And the second question is, what is the basis for this purported 20% industry-wide cost increase that is not evidenced in the four numbers that I gave first, because they are not clustered around 20%. So you can take them for something to answer at a future time if that's the way you do it in this, or it can be answered now if...
So you've laid out your concerns?
Not all of them, only this part of it. Only this...
Okay, we're 10 minutes in. How many parts are there?
3, basically.
3 parts of equal size?
3 pages, 3 parts. They're not of equal size, though I can abbreviate as one goes on.
Yeah, let's try to keep it as brief as possible. We have other people here who want to testify tonight, but Paul,
Okay.
do you want to take on this part, or do you want to hear all 3 parts before?
Whatever you deem fit, we can answer all.
Let's tackle these questions right now.
Well, I guess the question is, and from what I understand, is how we come up with a preliminary and why it's not matching what we purported to be about a 20% cost increase
Is that fair?
on one of the projects, I should say.
I guess I see it a little bit differently. I'm talking about percent changes. So what the actual estimates are, or what the actual cost numbers are, which is why I left them out, is not so important to me because they're different for each project. But the percent change within is something that can be compared apples to apples, oranges to oranges.
Well, I think the materials could be.
Well, but yes.
Will you address that? Why?
I guess,
But
so,
and it's not the percent change, it's the percent change based on what you have estimated in spring as opposed to estimated
Right.
in
There was an
fall.
estimate on 10th Street. There was an estimate on H Street. One came over, one
Right.
came under. How can that
Right.
possibly happen, Paul?
so when we go and we do our designs, we base it upon our estimates upon what we have seen on previous road construction projects of a similar size, because size matters. There's many variables that come into play when you're estimating. We can't control as engineers how contractors bid on these projects. These were bid as separate street projects under one contract. So every street project had its own quantities, its own estimated costs that the contractor put a bid on. So our estimates were showing that the assessment rate for 10th Avenue Northeast should be around $45 a foot based upon previous construction projects of a similar size. When we got the bids in and we started constructing this project, when you get into the final assessment roll, you base your final assessment numbers on the amounts that were bid on by the contractor, which we cannot control. So I would say the biggest difference there is our estimates were showing that the assessment rate should be $45 a foot for 10th Avenue and $61 a foot for H Street. They came in and the contractors bid on these projects, and the assessment rates came back at $57.21 and I think $62.33 or whatever it was for H Street. The percent change has nothing to do with how the numbers were calculated. It's just the difference between what we were estimating at the time before the bidding phase and what the contractor actually bid on the work. So that's something that as engineers we can't control. We can kind of look at maybe what the market's doing. I think the market was a surprise to everyone this year. As you saw in multiple of our construction projects, we saw this large increase.
Mr. Chair, just to be clearer too, is that when you do the estimate, you have no idea what the contractor is going to be bidding. So that's based on what the cost to them is
Right.
on the materials, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So you had the assessment, you had why did one increase and the other decrease? Was that addressed with that answer?
I think they both increase, one lesser than the other. The original assessment rate on H Street was $61 a foot is what we had calculated. I think the proposed was, and let me get to the item, I apologize. Computer fell asleep. The proposed assessment rate was $62.33. So there was an increase in both. It was just not as much of an increase on the H Street, well, not substantially more on the 10th Avenue side based on what the contractors bid.
All right, thanks, Paul. Did that address all of the questions you had on your first part?
No, it didn't, and
We don't need them to be satisfied and you to be happy. I just need answers to be given to each question you have.
So I can meet separately with Mr. Sandy to see what numbers we're looking at, because I have double and triple checked this in all the ways that I know how to do calculations and double check and triple check, but it might be that he has different root information than I have. So, and it would take more time for me to look through this and tell, it wouldn't be worth the time of the people who are listening to go through that kind of detail, I don't think. But I don't know if it can be done again later or not, but no,
I'm not sure legally if we can. Have you two sat down, Gene, Paul, have you guys met and talked about this at all?
Gene stopped in a few times and we've, exchanged documents and things. Yes.
Yeah. So you've talked with Paul, you haven't sat down and gone over everything with him yet? Let's get through what we can here in the public hearing tonight. You had your first page of 3 pages, and you had, I believe it was 4 questions. You called it, or why the assessments change, why are the estimate discrepancies? At one point you asked, pointed out there was no supply side evidence of a 20% industry-wide cost increase. Paul, can you touch on that? Well, we're going to have to answer that again when Buffalo Hills assessments come back.
The cost increase.
Yeah, the 20% increase on
Yeah, like I said, we can't control what the market is dictating and how contractors make their money. I mean, it's, when we estimate projects, and I don't know if I can, Scott can chime in on this, it was an industry-wide increase of costs that we saw throughout Minnesota this year. Whether or not the contractor, I think a lot of it had to do with there was storm sewer included on the H Street project, which helped keep the project costs down. The largest increase was in our bituminous prices, which the amount of storm sewer work that was on the H Street project helped to keep that down.
Mr. Chair, can we also say too, we saw that in every bid. We saw the increase of about 20% in every bid that did come through to us on this project. So it's not just that contractor that we awarded it to.
Well, I don't know Robert's Rules of Order or whatever the thing is, so I don't know when to speak or not to speak.
You can absolutely speak. But before you speak, I would want you to answer my question. Have we addressed the questions you presented from the first of your 3 pages so we can move on to the second page?
No.
Which question is that?
Because of this 20% Minnesota-wide thing, where does it come from besides conversations from person to person? I read The Economist every week. I study that thing. There's not a mention in the United States.
Do they talk about Brainerd a lot?
What?
Do they talk about Brainerd a lot?
No, but it does talk about Minnesota a fair amount, especially in the United States section. Minneapolis more than St. Paul, but at least Minnesota a fair amount. Amy Klobuchar was in the last issue for one of the full-page commentaries. So you still need staff here to address why it went up 20%. More than just this general conversation of up 20%. And not just because of the bids you receive. What is it industry-wise that has driven those bids up? Anderson Brothers, was the low bidder for the 1707. They were also, I have been told, the only bidder. What do you think when you have non-competitive bidding? that prices will stay down?
No, prices will go up when there's one provider of a service.
And so why do you accept non-competitive bidding? And I don't want to be adversarial, I do want to move on, but I'm at a distinct disadvantage in not knowing how these procedures work and trying to make sense of 1.5 inches of the stuff that I've collected. So
if you're looking for us to pen an op-ed for The Economist, we're not going to be able to do that for you tonight.
no, I'm not looking
You know,
for you to do
we
that.
experience as a city in all of our projects 20% above on-street projects because of the pavement surface. We just have. It's not an opinion.
And there's only one provider of service that has been bidding on our projects.
Right.
Right, so, I mean, if anybody in this room can go start a paving company and bid less than Anderson Brothers, and we'll take a look, but we can only go through the public bid process.
You're held hostage by them. And this is relative to my other, to the things about leadership.
Let's get to your things about leadership.
Well, that's at the end. I can do that, but I wasn't going to say very much about it except for that fact.
Well, can
That
I say
if-
something about
Absolutely.
the bidding? And it's an issue. We have to go through a process to put the bids out. If only one company bids, that's still competitive bidding. Every other company had a chance to bid. Outside of going out and having the city start its own construction company, there's not a whole lot we can do if there's not private
There
bidders.
is. You can not do it. It's that simple. You cannot do it at that time.
We had a public hearing about whether we should do the project or not. That's not this public hearing. This public hearing is about the assessments.
Okay. Well, okay, so I'll continue.
Please.
I contested the assessment increase also with reference to the Brainerd City Council mission statement. The people who don't have a paper copy, who are not members of the council or the city administration, might not know or recall what that says. It is to provide high-quality, cost-effective public services and leadership in creating a sustainable city. I'll start with high quality. I'm mostly going to quote from, let me, there are 3 parts here, I think, for the quality part. One is there are unmet expectations, unmet specifications, and cost ineffectiveness. And with respect to each of those, I have collected some statements or examples. I can truncate them, or I can proceed.
I would proceed unless they're related to the assessments on improvements 1706 and 1707, Gene.
Well, to me, it's related. Let's see. I'm taking most of these things from the SEH project updates. They would say, they said the normal working hours, the Anderson Brothers' normal working hours will be Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The first day of work was June 12th. They started working at 5:30 a.m. They did the same on the next day. I think it was 2 or 3 days before the end of that week, so I don't know if it was exactly the next day or the second after the next day. After that, and I did call in, or I did talk to someone about it, Paul Bremer, or I called someone at Anderson Brothers, and maybe it's unrelated. I know none of that. After that, it turned out to be within 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., but entirely unpredictable. When one would get up in the morning one day or go to bed one night, one would not know at all what was going to happen. Okay. The other thing is, or more things, let's see. The contractor has a fixed amount of time to get the work done. Another separate thing, we are anticipating approximately 8 to 10 weeks of construction, and later, actually their last of 4 updates, we anticipate all work to be complete by mid-October. Well, on October 17th, the bike route sign and a neighbor's mailbox were reinstalled. And October 18th, the H Street 10th Avenue intersection was painted, and H Street at the intersection, yeah. And that's progress, and that's good. But nevertheless, the stakes marking the places for the sign, for the Bike Street sign and the mailbox are still there. And the 10th Avenue street painting for the bike route hasn't been done. So that's one thing. And another thing, just another approach to it, at the, one of the updates says, at times it may even seem like not much is getting done. That's an understatement. According to the Anderson Brothers pay requests, there was no billable work from the 24th of August to the 27th of September, and only $771 for turf reestablishment between 28 September and 25 October. I understand an extension was granted, but those come at costs to the people who live there in other ways other than just money. So I'll move on to the unmet specifications. There are 3 things. The 4-to-1 gradient from the yard to the curb, the 3-foot flares at the base of the driveways, and the topsoil deficiencies. The boulevard gradient, or the right-of-way gradient, was, I understood, specified at 4-to-1. That might be a minimum, I don't know. But 4-to-1, and Paul Bremer and I had a couple of discussions about making sure that that would accommodate mowing the lawn, and it would, and that's what I expected, and I was satisfied with that. I came home one day and found that they had stripped the turf back 12 to 15 feet. Not 4 feet, but 12 to 15 feet, depending on the location relative to the sidewalk that they put in. That makes extra cost, extra work, extra everything, and it was completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. Okay, we'll go on to the 3-to-1 driveway flare. I have an 8-foot wide driveway rather than 10 feet. The specification for the flares was 3 feet. I asked for it to be smaller, but that was not able to be accommodated. When I came home again, or actually I was there, so I was there when they were putting the forms in, and because I'd been told they were 3-foot flares, I didn't challenge it. When I looked at the work after it was done, I measured it. They're not 3 feet, they're 3 1/4. Seems minor to you, but it isn't minor to me, because I'd asked for smaller flares for specific reasons that I conveyed in the conversations. And they are that people use those flares to turn around in my driveway, preferentially over the dirt driveway to one side or the driveway further down the block on the other side. And they go off the driveway, flares or not, into the yard. And also the more obvious the flares are, the more likely it is these are 2 anticipated unintended consequences, well, anticipated, not hoped for consequences, but that have occurred since they put in the flares. And it's not, they didn't happen because they're 1/4 of a foot longer. I know that. But they happened, I'm still going to use the unmet specifications as an argument. It just made it easier to see the driveway. It just makes it bigger. It just makes it more tempting. It didn't cause it, but it doesn't stop it. And this is something that I will live with for as long as I live on that property. Filling in ruts created by people who cannot turn around in a driveway because they can't stay on the driveway. And I'll go on to the topsoil one. I brought my exhibits. Paul Sandy has seen these exhibits. I have 4 of these containers. 3 of them are from the different sections of my front yard. 1 of them is from the topsoil that went in across the street with the Safe Routes to School contractor. They don't pass the specifications for the percentage of organic matter. I've not seen that report, but I understand it to be true. No surprise there, because when they took off the 12 to 15 feet back from the curb of the turf, they took 4 inches of the only topsoil, what I call topsoil, what a big box store would call topsoil. Black, not a lot of weed seeds, not a lot of rocks, that's my reference point for the definition. They removed all of that, and then they compacted the sand underneath and brought in not new topsoil, it's called something in the charge thing, topsoil borrow or some common topsoil borrow. I don't know what that means, but they brought in topsoil that's essentially what was underneath the true stuff connected to the 4 inches of the roots of my previous turf. That, it's no wonder that the turf restoration and re-restoration and the continued work on the turf on 10th Avenue Northeast on the west side, that is unsuccessful. But anyway, that's unmet specifications. The contractor takes shortcuts, takes liberties, and is not following your specifications. I understand you can deduct payment for some of these things. That doesn't help the assessment unless the assessment is also reduced by the amount that you deduct the payment to them. It doesn't help us when you know that those contractors have done less than good jobs in the past, and yet you feel compelled to go with them because one bid is, as Mr. Pritchett said then, which is a new interpretation for me of competitive, but one bid is competitive. So I'll go on to the cost ineffectiveness. And
Let's hit the specifications. Paul, you went 15 feet in her yard. Did the bid doc say we'd only go 4 feet into her yard?
A 4-to-1 slope means that that's the maximum slope we'll go. It's based on how far we feel the construction limit should be.
No, but the turf destruction.
That's what I'm saying, is a 4-to-1 is meant to be the maximum slope, which is 25%. It doesn't mean we're only going 4 feet. It means that we're going back as far as what we feel the construction or equipment that could accommodate the construction should go within the city right of way.
Okay, so then
It's still an unmet expectation because I don't know that, and apparently neither does Paul Bremer, because he literally took out his I do know what the numbers mean and what the gradient means, but he
look,
literally showed
we have
me.
that one addressed, Gene. So now 3¼ foot flares instead of 3 foot flares. Were we going to do 3 foot flares? We ended up doing 3¼ foot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the case. It was 39 inches, I believe, instead of 36. Correct.
Well, how did that happen?
I don't know. It's I guess a workmanship issue when they set the forms up, that it was, instead of 3, it was 3¼
We still have retainage out on this project?
Oh, yeah, yep.
I suppose they'll be doing sod through next summer, probably.
Yeah.
Well, we should get that fixed. Organic matter specifications in the topsoil. It sounds like you a lot of topsoil was ripped up there, and maybe
Yes.
maybe entering the spring, we should just bring over some black dirt and some sod and just do it right instead of trying to plant seed at the expense to the contractor.
I will say that the contractor has been working with us to get grass established, and if you were to drive through that project right now, I would say it looks pretty good from a grass standpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's still some areas that they need to correct, and that's why
we
we're.
identified the issues to the contractor, and they've mowed a couple times, and they've sprayed weed killer, they've applied extra fertilizer, and the contract is open through the spring, so.
And that's been at their cost so far.
Yeah. Is the grass looking better today than it was 2 weeks ago?
No,
Well, we'll continue working on it till spring, and
I don't want you working on it. I put in hours and hours and hours of work. Mine looks good. I was the only person out for hours at a time on my block that was doing any work. But I declined the contractor's leveling. Neither Mr. Sandy nor Mr. Bremer knew what they meant by leveling. It's a very crude process that makes things worse. I declined their mowing. Their mowing contrary to what the fourth project update, which wasn't available at the time they were doing these things. The fourth project update was perhaps prompted by the problems with the turf restoration. The fourth project update goes into detail about how to care for a newly established lawn, how to mow it, how to water it, to establish it, and the contractors did none of those things. I have no faith that anybody but myself will do it, and yet I'm the one who's told by the subcontractor that I didn't know what I was doing. My yard looks good. I don't want anybody else messing with it. But the point is that it took a great deal of time and effort, and that they didn't do a good job. So don't spend more money on my yard. Reduce my assessment. That's what I'm asking for.
okay, and that is page 2. Page 3 is your
Yes.
quality of craftsmanship.
Well,
I really want you to get through, but if we can keep this one as brief as possible and get to the main points of why you object the assessment on improvement 1706 and 1707, because this is, we're 35 minutes in, and this is your right to speak at a public hearing, but the council also has rights to impose time limits, and we're hearing you out on this, and
Okay.
and I want to hear you finish the
I'll
rest of
try-
your spiel, but let's get it done as quick as we
I
can.
pulled more than 5,400 weeds counted by the roots, not an estimate, and I have a system for doing it, that filled 3 of these buckets before I mowed. So that was a significant investment of time. That's how bad more than 5,400 weeds of 5 types, 2 of them not native or at least new to my yard. So again, a testament, I think, to the poorness of the prep or the work that was done. This bucket was filled up to here with end-of-your-thumb-sized small rocks that I removed about 40 pounds, and I have worked carrying 40-pound buckets of things, and so I think it's a fairly good estimate. I have pulled, I'll say, about 40 pounds of small rocks out of that topsoil. All of this takes time and effort. So I'll just leave it at that. In terms of cost effectiveness, that whole subcontractor is cost ineffective. And I would also suggest to you that a $552 plus however many cents tree is not cost effective. If you can't, perhaps the specifications that you put in your requesting for your bids need to be a little clearer so that people can't take advantage of certain things. but you can go get a tree, and plus, the tree was planted after, this was planted on the Safe Routes to School side, and it was planted after the turf restoration had been done over there. Why doesn't somebody plant a tree before they put the grass down? It was not watered, it is not mulched, and we'll take our chances on how many of those many trees on the Safe Routes to School side live through the winter. That is cost ineffectiveness. And about leadership, I guess you probably have a pretty good impression of what I think about the project and what I think about the increase. I don't know what to suggest as an appropriate assessment because I'm not familiar with the project, and though I have listened carefully to what Mr. Sandy has said, I don't feel any more enlightened specifically about how it works. The original initial one was presented as to me, I don't know if other people asked the questions, but to me, in response to my questions, it's like a 90% probability of being less than that in the final report. And here we come back and it's up 27%, higher than anything else, higher proportionately than the total costs, higher than the total costs. The assessment is not proportional to the total costs, and higher than the neighboring program, way higher. Nothing clustering around 20%. It doesn't seem fair or it doesn't seem correct to me. So I will contest again as my final statement. I don't know what to suggest, I guess, except that because 45 was the initial one, it seemed optimistic, and because of anchoring bias, I would ask that for my property at least it go back down to $45. I've put in way more on an hourly basis of time on that property than anyone, including Anderson Companies and all of the subcontractors. So thank you.
Thank you. Quick question, what are we paying this sod grass contractor? How much is that subcontractor making per linear foot on grass restoration?
What was it, about 7% of the total contract?
Yeah.
It was about 7% of the total contract.
So on a property like Jean's, how much money would that be?
I don't have that number right offhand.
Okay.
$5 a foot.
Yeah,
have one more
$5
thing.
a foot or something.
How much?
$5 a foot.
$5 a foot? How wide's your lot?
Mine is 65 feet.
65 feet. And what are you holding there?
I'm sorry, I thought I ended. This is what was in the topsoil, common borrowed, however the line item is listed, that just a sample of the big things that were in the topsoil that came from Anderson Brothers. I am not making this up. Piece of asphalt and a rock.
Thank you. So we're still in the public hearing of the contested assessments for improvements 1706 and 1707 H Street and 10th Avenue Northeast Reconstruction Project. Does anybody else want to come speak and contest? Come on up.
My name is Terry Ford, and I live at the end of 10th Avenue and Highway 210. We have a whole city block of sidewalk. And as I asked last time, and I kind of heard some of the answers, is why it went from $45 assessment to $57. And I was told at the last meeting that was based on in the past. My question is, again, how far in the past? Was it 73, 86, 2004? What was it based on? Asphalt? Was it based on the total construction?
Paul, are you taking your estimates from the 21st century?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
What
Like
years, though?
How
How
long-
We
recent?
usually average like the last 5 years of construction.
The last 5 years of construction? Okay.
Okay, and so then, when the bids came in, or the bid came in and it was higher, I'm assuming you got that before the work started in June.
Address your questions through
Got
me,
the-
please.
You got the bids before June?
Paul, can you,
Yeah, before the project started,
Before-
yes, yes.
and it started in
We
June?
do
We got the
bid.
projects, we got the bids before then?
So at that time, we were wondering why notification didn't go out saying, hey, that it's gonna be cost more for the project. And I guess my question when I was asking last time was, I guess if I was building a garage and I would look at getting the estimates of what it would cost, but I would like to go and price it out myself at Menards or wherever to make sure that I'm not getting taken advantage of. So I guess that was what I was kind of asking. You know, you said there was a 20% increase. Maybe you should have looked in March to see what other places were doing, or if there was a 20% increase across the board. I don't understand why we get, according to what I come up with, 26.7% increase. I can understand being off $3 to $5 maybe a foot, but 12? And H Street only has to pay $5 more a foot than we do, and they got a whole extra layer of asphalt. We were told that the sidewalk would not cost property owners any money. It's beginning to look like the $12 a foot might be having to pay for that sidewalk. It was a safe routes to school funding. It is my understanding that only 85% of the funding for that was used up, what you received from, for the project. And if I remember correctly, in the newspaper, it said there were some issues with the contractors. And so the original contractor, the state did not approve, so you had to hire a new one. And any cost difference could be, the state would give you the funding to cover that. I also know that the Safe Route to School also covers streets. So my question is, if there's any money left in that sidewalk fund, could it not be reverted to the assessments? Or could you not ask for the difference to lower the assessments back down to what you originally thought? When we talked to Dave, my husband and I talked to Dave about it, and we had concerns when the project was going on. When the flooding happened and it washed, our property's on the front page of the dispatch where the road washed down onto the highway. So we knew there was going to be added cost to bring that dirt back. I watched them dig a hole to replace the water main. That hole started out not very deep. Pretty soon it's the whole width of the road and 30-some feet, whatever, and they couldn't find the water main, so they had to bury it back in. Come back the next day, dig it out again. And as she was saying, there was a lot of things coming from a construction family, I was amazed that what was happening. And it's hard for you being a woman going out there and you're questioning why this isn't right. Why are you doing this? You know, we did not have grass, seed, or anything. They haven't even cleared our boulevard. Yet they came by and sprayed all the green stuff. I said, why are you doing that? Because the state requires us to do that for erosion. Now they come back and they plant the seed, and then they have to respray. I'm thinking erosion, it's been flooding all summer with the rain, and what held it there until the time you decided to spray it? So there's a lot of things that I see that if there was any overruns in the budget or in the contractors saying they needed more money or costs to come up with this difference in estimated and the $12. I just have a hard time coming up with that. I'm asking that you at least reduce it. If there's, you know, I'm thinking that should have been closer to whatever.
Yeah, so
You know, like
do you have more
three to
questions?
5, I could see that be enough, maybe $3 to $5 in an estimate, but 12? And then I'm asking, was there something that caused it to go up to that? Was there, other than the contractor, is what I'm hearing? It wasn't like, well, they had to haul in 20 tons of fill or something, or, you know, I know the trees were kind of expensive.
So has there been, Paul, cost overruns, change orders that have increased the cost of this contract?
The only change order is the one that was on the agenda earlier, so.
We had the one tonight
nothing
that kind of
significant.
combined a few of them,
Right.
and how much was that?
$9,000.
9,600.
$9,000 on
The biggest
600,000.
cost change, the way I understand it, I didn't calculate the assessments preliminary or at the end, has to do with how the bids came in. So you have your engineer's estimate based on historical information, you know, kind of like fidelity, you know, past results are no guarantee of future returns, or however it goes. I mean, that's what you're dealing with here. It all had to do with how the bids came in.
So
There's not any construction cost overruns that are causing a significant change in the assessment rates.
So we're statutorily required to mail the citizens, the residents, affected residents in the spring, saying we're probably going to assess you this fall. Here's a meeting, let us know if we should do this project or not. And then we're legally required, statutorily required, to send them a notice in the fall saying, hey, here's your assessment, come contest it if you want. But we don't notify them. There's no statutory requirement for us to notify them, hey, we're opening bids and awarding the project on this date. So if I were just a citizen living my own life, not paying attention to what City Hall is doing, I would have only gotten the spring notice, the fall notice. I would have never been able to speak my piece on the actual contracts.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's a problem we have here. Because and Terry, you would have been able to come in. You were more than welcome to come in when that was awarded, but we didn't notify you.
Well, and the thing is, like she was saying too, when this was all going, you know, we were there tried to be at all the meetings. And when the $45 thing came up, it will probably be less than that. Most of the projects end up being less than what he estimates. Am I correct, Paul?
Yes, yeah, we
Okay.
certainly try to.
He's taking his lumps on it, trust me.
So all of a sudden, this one is over, and I just like, so, and like I said, $3 to $5 over a foot, I can understand, but 12, I mean,
But, I'm sorry, Mrs. Ford, but we have to understand that the estimate, we have no idea what the cost of the materials are based on our history.
And I will say also, we do our assessment calculations based on the way we have done it every year to make sure that everyone is treated the exact same. So we treat them as a residential street, whether you live on 8th Street, 10th Avenue Northeast, Jackson Street, College Drive. We base our assessments on a typical residential street and calculate them the exact same way so that no one is getting gouged or the otherwise.
And that, you know, we're talking about the estimate one here
Yeah.
now. When the bids come on and we say we want business X, they got the bid. There is no, like Gabe was saying, no statutory reason for us to say, send a letter to.
And if the council wants us to do that, we certainly can. I mean, that's a simple letter that says that the bids came in 10% over. But I would caution you on that because that doesn't necessarily mean that the assessments are going to be over. It depends on what.
Let's put that on let's put that on the side. Have Safety and Public Works talk about that, address that, see if that is something we want to do in the future. At a future meeting.
Just a couple questions myself to answer some of the questions that Terry had. Were the sidewalks, did they have any effect on the
No,
assessment?
the Safe Routes to School
Does
project.
Safe Routes to Schools cover streets?
No,
Was there any added cost because of flooding?
no.
Okay, and so there were no cost overruns? That
Not
cost,
related to
except for
that,
the one
no.
tonight, that,
Yep.
okay.
Just in the
Terry?
paper, that there was just an article in that newspaper just the other day from the Department of Transportation, and it does cover roads. According to Dave, somebody down there, I think it was.
Our funding was specifically for sidewalk and sidewalk construction adjacent to those streets and in other multiple locations in northeast Brainerd. That's what the
Really
Dave
funding-
Pritchett or Dave
project-specific
Biddle.
funding.
Yeah.
So Terry, you're contesting your assessment. You don't
I
think
get-
it's
yeah.
the correct amount. What do you think the correct assessment amount is?
Well, like I said, I would, $3 to $5 a foot is, to me, is reasonable, but 12 that sounds just so far off. And I guess when he's trying to say we go for the past, maybe you need to look at something a little closer to the future or get more of a updated estimate. If that happens statewide, maybe you can call another county or something to say, hey, is it, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, let's see
I
what
was
the
just going to
engineers
say,
say about that.
I've seen it too. Paul alluded to that. I mean, we saw a big jump in construction costs this year, not just in the Brainerd area. We've seen it in the St. Cloud area as well. I mean, it's bituminous and gravel prices have really gone up. Concrete prices over the last 5 years have also just extremely
There's nothing to indicate that these
skyrocketed.
projects would have been cheaper next year. So if we would like to continue updating our infrastructure at what we think is going to be the market rate and not getting any cheaper.
I guess
I think the other thing too is it's, when he talks about it's a 5-year span. They're trying to look at the trends to estimate. It's not like we're looking 5 years ago and this is what we spent. So it's not like it's a dated estimate. It's as up to date as they can be, and then the bids and
We're
those
now
prices
estimating
happen.
asphalt at $90
I think
a ton.
that sounds a little, when he says, like looking at it last 5 years, it's not like,
It's forward thinking. If
Yeah,
it
it's-
increases 10% a year, we expect another 10% increase. We don't expect a 40% increase. And that was just, I don't know if those are the right numbers, but that was the type of situation we ran into this year.
Another point, we don't choose our contractor. We bid the project out. Whoever's low, your hands are basically
We have,
tied. The city attorney can chime in on this as well. That's just how it goes, being a city.
Yeah.
The city of Brainerd and SEH did not construct the projects. It's the contractor. They have full responsibility for quality. We have some tools in our toolbox to address things, and, as things come up, we address them, and neither project is closed out, so we still have time to address things, that are either unresolved or come to light still, so.
How does
There
it
was one
work?
more question that
How
Terry
does it
asked that,
work for
hang on a
this-
second, Terry.
oh, sorry.
One more question that she asked that I would like to hear the answer to. So we originally had a low bidder, and then the state declared that since they're from Nevis, they don't meet underprivileged or anything like that. We had to switch bidder, we had to switch contractors. And is there a way that the state reimburses us that gap from our low bidder? And have we received those funds, or are we?
The state, we have documentation that the state is willing to cover the increased cost.
Okay, so
of
the
going from the
change
first to
in
the second
contractor
bidder.
is not related to
And
the
that's
change in
only
the
with the
assessment.
Safe Routes to School
Nothing
contract,
to do
which
with
has
this
nothing to
project.
do with what we're
Oh,
talking
that
about
was Safe
now.
Routes to School,
Yep,
that wasn't.
That was the disadvantaged
different
business
project.
enterprise. It was a
Okay,
completely
that was
separate
just, it was a question that was brought up. Terry, did you have
That
any other
project,
question?
we
Or
had two
or do you
bidders.
have
I was just.
a solution for what you want to see here?
I guess I was just going to ask when you guys were talking about how you come up with your estimates and stuff. How did you come up with the estimate on the sidewalk for the Safe Routes to School?
You can answer
Is
that.
that based on the 5-year thing too?
It's the same kind of process. You look at past bids and look at recent bids on other projects.
Of similar
and-
size.
Of similar size and character, and it's an estimate. So, you know, we came in right in with the estimate on that project, so.
And that's what I was wondering how they got in on that estimate to so close and so far off.
Sidewalks and streets are built on a different material.
Every
I
time you,
know, and concrete's more expensive, but
But we knew it was going to be more expensive. Its increase was not as high as the asphalt increase.
you never
or the
know what
material.
you're gonna get with bidding. I mean, you know, it's not necessarily
You open the
exactly
first bid of the year,
same.
it's always a surprise.
Yeah.
It really is.
I guess I was just thinking like maybe get closer to like maybe March or something before, I guess like I was saying, I would want to be closer or no more before, so I would know that contractor's not taking advantage.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Paul, this is my understanding, the further we get into the construction season, the higher prices, they usually have a tendency to go up. And that's one of the reasons why we do it on an early bid, to try to get it at the most reasonable cost.
It's really dependent on how busy the contractors are, and that's why
It
they
can vary
increase.
throughout the
Yep.
year.
Pardon me?
It can really vary. I mean, traditionally, lower prices are maybe in a winter bid, but
As they get fuller schedules, they tend to increase costs.
Okay.
So as a final, your assessment that you're contesting, Terry, is $5,148.90. What are you proposing that is an unfair assessment based on the actual scope of the actual project that took place in front of your house?
Gosh, I don't know. Like I said, I can see, maybe being half of the 12. I would be willing, I understand there's cost overruns, and I understand that, bidding, it goes up, but that just seems like such a far amount to me. It just doesn't, make sense.
Okay, anything else you'd like the council to hear?
Nope,
Thank you, Terry.
thank you.
Anyone else here to talk about the contested assessments on improvements 1706 and 1707 H Street and 10th Avenue Northeast Reconstruction Project? Anyone else here to contest an assessment? Anyone else here to contest an assessment? Seeing nobody else, we'll close the public hearing at 9:30. So next up, what's the next step in the process here, Paul?
You guys can deliberate, and if you feel that the testimony was such a way to change the assessment amount, you can certainly do that tonight and adopt them, or I guess it's up to you guys on what you want to do.
Well, I'll say,
The attorney also sounds like he wants.
Joe, do you have something to
No,
direct us here?
process, President Council, also just comment that there's been a lot of discussion about the estimate and how it was inaccurate and so forth. Just as, I'm sure you all know this, well stated for the record anyway, the estimate has no bearing on the validity of the actual assessment. Whether it was accurate, inaccurate, how they got to it, the courts will never look at an estimate that occurred 6 months before the end of the project and came up with final cost. In the end of the day, all that matters is benefit versus cost to that property owner. That's the full analysis. So there's been a lot of discussion about those issues, but they're really not bearing on the outcome of where you're going with this.
Okay, well, and then I'll say this resolution does include the two property ideas that were already addressed by Personnel and Finance. So I think we'll want to pull at least the one that we're going to talk about again in 2 weeks out of this resolution.
I just want to clarify too, like process. So once you adopt the assessment, the resident has 30 days to pay it, and then we certify it to the county. We do have to have the certification to the county by November 30th. So, but it could be something that if the resident would pay, as long as I think we know by the middle of December, I think that the county would give us a little leeway on a couple properties. I just want to state that.
Oh, so we're running about 4 days late here.
Correct. But, I mean, they give us a little time. But that's kind of the process of how the assessment works.
Okay, does anybody have any deliberation before we get a motion on a resolution? Seeing no deliberation, I'll take a motion on the resolution.
I'll give it a shot, Mr. Chair. I move that we pull the one financial hardship assessment and certify the rest as is.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? You want to speak to the motion, Kelly?
Mr. Chair, I think the attorney made my argument, and that's that I think the value for the assessment is there.
Okay, so I think I'll vote no, because I would think on the, where's the property? The one with the grass restoration, where she doesn't even want the contractor on her property. And the contractor's charging us $5 a linear foot, but she doesn't want him there because she already fixed the grass, she did a better job than they ever could. Maybe she should get the $5 a foot on her 65 linear feet, $325 break on her assessment. She did the work that the contractor wasn't able to competently do. So I think she should get that break. But otherwise, I agree with, I'll vote against the resolution because I think she should get that $325 break. But otherwise, I agree with the motion. Any other discussion?
I would be willing to accept that. I would be willing to accept your argument.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
With this issue, and perhaps, and tell me if I'm not even in the right time to say this, but this is kind of a chronic issue on the restoration of the lawns and stuff. Is that something that we can address at a later, that we could set some standards that needs to be done, that we would only accept?
Paul could answer that maybe.
We do have standards that we look to before we have acceptance, and that's why we have pushed the project back into 2020 to ensure that the standards that not only we set, but we have stormwater standards with erosion and things and coverage of grass before we can accept the project.
Well, I guess I'm looking at the quality of what is put down. I mean, can we say that the topsoil is minimal or no rocking or anything like that?
We have specifications in place for topsoil, and
On all
it did
this stuff
fail
too?
specification, correct. Mrs. Jean was correct in saying that the topsoil did fail. And the restoration on the other side of the street was much better. Different contractor, different work methods. When we bid a project, we have the bidders and we have the contractors, and if they meet the requirements of being a responsible contractor, we have to work with them, so.
And how long can we keep the retention of the project? Is it within a year? Do they have a year to?
Joe can speak to the new law. What does the retainage statute now say? You can keep 250% of the work outstanding, or 1%, whichever is greater, something like that. I don't.
The 1% goes to the final documentation.
Yep.
So it's 250% of $500 per number, right? It used to be a straight 5%. Very simple. For whatever reason, the legislature dialed that back so that once you hit substantial completion, it's either a dollar amount, I think it's $500, or 250% of what it costs to repair what's left pursuant to the engineer or architects, plus 1% to cover all the documentation. It's got more complicated, but the end result is that you're retaining less after substantial completion.
And keeping you employed.
And what about the longevity? Are we looking at a year or 2 year, or what are we looking at on that restoration? What's the length of time that we can?
It depends on the spring, honestly. If we see, what is acceptable to, us as engineers is acceptable from a project completion
Okay.
standpoint, then we'll accept the work. And if the council doesn't want us to accept the work, we can certainly hold it open for longer, but.
Well, I do have to agree with, I will agree with the
Just one other
president.
clarification, I mean, on the properties that we're talking about, I mean, the contractor did do the work, they did furnish and install topsoil, they did grade it, they did seed it, they did fertilize it. What was rejected or what they didn't do on the specific property we heard testimony on was the follow-up maintenance to try to correct it, because the property owner wouldn't allow them on their property or the right-of-way adjacent to the property, so.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to adopt the resolution as is, removing the one property that was discussed by Personnel and Finance already. We'll vote by roll call.
You ready?
Ready for a vote?
Stunek?
Yes.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Bivens?
Yes.
Bordeaux?
No.
Erickson?
Yes.
Lambert?
No,
Johnson?
No, that motion carries. Brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is a public hearing and a resolution for nuisances, contested assessments. We will open the public hearing for contested assessments on the nuisances at 9:38. Public hearing is now open. Is there anybody here to talk about nuisance abatement? Is there anybody here to contest their nuisance assessment? Is anybody here to discuss nuisance assessments? Seeing nobody rise, we will close the public hearing at 9:39. David.
Thank you, Mr. President. So again, there were two assessments that were pulled from the nuisance rolls on the October 21st meeting. Those are PIDs 41190516 and PID 412412008. In the situation of the first, that's the resident of Ms. Jessica Summers. In this situation, she's testing a $1,000 assessment for an unlicensed vehicle. In this situation, we did go back and do some research. The vehicle is now departed from the property. Having done some research, however, this is a vehicle that we actually have been attempting to address since 2017. So 3 years we've been working on this vehicle. It doesn't look like it's moved. It's actually, if you look at GIS, you can see it on the property. And then in this situation, this is also an issue that was never brought to my department's attention, as in when we were trying to address the situation, we were never contacted and trying to work out a solution. And at one point, actually, we have one photograph where the property owner actually attempted to try to address it by just completely removing the license plate from the vehicle, which actually made the
That brings
situation
unlicensed to a whole new level.
whole new level. So at this one, I'm not really sure, again, the vehicle is now gone, but I'm not really sure kind of what a solution would be. If the council has a desire to waive the assessment or not, that is up to the council. On the second one, it's Mr. Richard Weiss. He submitted a letter to the council on the 21st. This was a property maintenance issue. He maxed out at $2,250. This is for the roof of his property. This is another one that we've been dealing with since 2015. In the time since October 21, I did reach out to the HRA and John Schomer with the HRA to see if he would be a candidate for their revolving loan program. They believe that he indeed would be. And so I reached out to him. I drafted a letter stating, here's the situation. Because we've been dealing with this now for almost 5 years, the solution is he needs to fix his roof. And so I gave him the option of, I sent him the letter and the documentation that Mr. Schomer sent to me of the application and the program details, and I did share with him that if he is willing to enter into that program with the HRA, then they believe that he's a good candidate for it, that I would bring it before the council and would recommend that that assessment be waived with the purpose of those funds being used to fix his roof. And I was informed that this afternoon he did stop by the HRA and drop off his application.
you did? Oh, good.
Good, I look forward to helping him. Any questions of the Community Development Director? David.
On the licensed vehicle, you said that you're not aware if it was removed. When she came in, she said that they had removed it and that there was.
No, I said it is removed. It is currently removed. It has been.
But in the process, they tried just taking the license off.
They just took the license plate completely off, which actually, I guess, as Council President said, actually just worsened the violation.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions or deliberation? Hearing none, we have a resolution before us that would assess both of the property IDs.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was going to make a motion,
Go ahead.
Alderman Lampert, so if you have a question,
No, go right ahead.
my motion would be to adopt the resolution as proposed.
Second.
We have a motion and by Bevins, a second by Lambert, to adopt the attached resolution as proposed. Is there any discussion on it?
Mr. Chair, I support this motion. With the car, we've been dealing that with since 2017, so it's nothing new. She should have been able to address that. Mr. Weiss, I would expect that roof to be repaired by during next building season. But I would be very uncomfortable to not do it, yeah.
Well, I agree with the motion. I mean, it is our city code that you have to have licensed vehicles and good roofs, but I will take my annual opportunity to say I really hate the city's regime of just driving around taking pictures of people's yards. I think it should be 100% complaint-driven enforcement. We're bringing in college-educated interns and then giving them keys to a leased vehicle and say, drive around and take pictures of stuff that you don't think looks good. What a wasted experience, and what a unfriendly thing for City Hall to do to people who are just trying to get by living in the city of Brainerd. It is unfriendly. It is wrong. It is not related to these assessments, but it is just the whole program we have together. I don't like it. But I support the motion.
Should we pull the police off the street based on your argument? We won't need them. It can just be complaint driven. I mean, based on your argument. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that we have rules. We have to.
Our fire
also
department does a
enforce
heck
them.
of a job when it's complaint driven.
I get that. It's a but it's a multifaceted argument. We could do the same for the police and just say, go out when you're called. We could. Probably save a lot of money. So, I'm.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we will vote on the resolution as presented by roll call.
Stunek.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Bevins.
Yes.
Padot.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Lambert.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Next up on the agenda is we need to appoint a council liaison we should have done this last meeting or 2 meetings ago, but is that where I'm at?
No, you're at the call for applicant.
Oh, I still got call for applicants.
Thank
Mayor
you
Meg?
very much. At this time, I'll call for applicants for the following
Just scroll down.
committees. The terms will expire on 12/31 of the year that I state. Cable TV Advisory Committee, 1 term expiring 2019, which isn't very long. 2 terms expiring 2021. On the Charter Commission, we have 2 terms expiring 2020, 1 term expiring 2021, and 1 term expiring 2022. Then the EDA, we're looking for 1 individual. The term is to expire on September 7th of the said year, which is 2020. With this said, I will ask that you stop at the council chambers, or City Hall, or at the city's website to make your application. It is very rewarding to be part of the city and help its governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Next item on the agenda is replacing liaison for the Fire Advisory Board, the Transportation Advisory Committee, and I'm going to add Northland Arboretum to that, and I'm going to ask Jim and Connie to look back and make sure Sue wasn't serving on any other commissions that we haven't reappointed to. And I think, Tad, you're not on any commissions, right? Do you want to serve on the Fire Advisory Board, Transportation Advisory Committee, and a Northland Arboretum?
Oh, I get to pick?
If you don't want to, we have somebody who may want to serve on the Fire Board. I don't know.
Yeah, in my job, I work a lot with transportation. Be happy to serve there. Fire would be a learning opportunity, and as with the Arboretum, so.
You don't need to give us a recipe, you're on it, that's what it is.
So, looking for a motion, or I'll make those appointments if I need to, or looking for a motion to approve them.
I'll approve that. I'll make that motion.
Second.
So we have a motion by Lambert, second by Bevins, to appoint Alderman Erickson to the Fire Advisory Board, the Transportation Advisory Committee, and the Northland Arboretum Board. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I do want to just let Tad know that the, Sue held this second, the alternate. So she didn't have to come to the transportation meetings. She was an alternate.
Oh, getting
So-
off easy.
Even easier, I would have taken that one.
But you
So
get
you're the primary, so
Primary, yeah.
she shows up when, so Tad, you'll be responsible to show up when Jan
Get
can't
an
make
inside
it.
route on.
Or you can go when you want to go anyway, but you only get to vote when she's not there.
Oh, and if you're interested in golden retriever
See how they
puppies
build
being
you
on
up,
the
all of a
ARB
sudden
board,
they
you've
cut
got
you
the
off.
inside track to 13 of them, so.
Build them up and cut them off.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Tad. Next up is a public hearing implementation progress SCDP grant CDAP 1700190 FY19, presented by Finance Director Hillman.
So this is just a call for the public hearing. The public hearing will actually be held at the next council meeting. This is just part of the requirement of the grant that we have to hold a public hearing while the grant is open.
Okay, staff is recommending setting a public hearing due to proper notice for discussion on the implementation and progress of the Northeast and Downtown Brainerd SCDP grant awarded in 2018 for 7:30 PM at our next regularly scheduled council meeting on November 18th, 2019.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next up is the industrial park lot sale procedure. Connie, David, I don't know who wants to
I'll
take it
start it
first.
off. Thank you, Mr. President. So in your packet, you have a memo that's coming from the EDA. Specifically, this one was written from the Industrial Park Subcommittee to the EDA Board, and we just copied it in there because we think it covers pretty much all the information that was discussed at the EDA special meeting last Thursday morning. The purpose of this is to better market and then incentivize kind of the moving of our industrial lot, specifically in Phase 4, and then also along the Wright Street extension. Since FedEx went in place in 2015, we haven't had any really action out there. And the desire is to kind of create incentives for more development out there. So in this memo, what this memo is a process that has been worked through for identifying, not identifying, when a developer comes forward, it's a process for essentially selling the lots using the EDA as the selling agent. Through this, there's three main components that we're pretty much asking the council tonight to agree upon. These have already been agreed upon unanimously by the EDA. The first is, as the process would be, that once we get a developer that has come forward, has expressed interest in purchasing lots in the industrial park to create a development, is that the EDA would request that the city transfer ownership of the land in the industrial park to the EDA. The purpose here is allowing, the city currently holds that property. It is currently sitting under the city and therefore is not taxed. By transferring the property to the EDA and the EDA being the seller of the property, the main benefit here is that the EDA, by state statute, holds a right to reverter that the city does not have. So should, for any reason, the developer fail in their agreement, the city has a right to reverter. One thing that we would like to clarify with that, as we talk to our bond counsel and as well as some of our financial advisors, is that that right to reverter is only in place if there's no mortgage on top of it. So any lending institution would be in first position. And then the agreement here would be, what we'd be asking for is that the city agree to sell those lots. The EDA would be requesting that the city transfer the lots to them at the time of the sale. The EDA is not looking to ask the council to transfer the lots now. The main reason that being is the EDA, again, by state statute, only has 7 years that they can be tax-free. After 7 years, they have to start paying taxes on them, so we wouldn't want them transferred until they're ready to be purchased. The second piece to this is also request that the council agree to sell the lots for $1 per acre. The purpose of this, again, is that the last time the lots were listed, they were listed at $62,225 per acre. And if you look around the state of Minnesota, the Midwest, or the country, there's, industrial lots are a dime a dozen, and this is a way to kind of, again, incentivize people to come to Brainerd, is that we're essentially going to give you the lots for $1 an acre. This increases interest in those lots, and then also part of the deal that would happen here is by doing it as $1 per acre, we would be creating a business subsidy because the property is worth more than that. One thing, because it'd be a business subsidy, it would not affect the fair market value of the property and therefore the tax of the property. So if we sold them for $1 an acre, the Crow Wing County assessor would still go out there, assess them for the fair market value, and tax them accordingly. The final thing that we're looking for the council to agree to is to authorize the creation of a TIF or tax abatement districts based on need. So if a developer is coming out and they're looking for tax abatement or TIF, that the council is willing to do that. And also, even if the developer is not looking for TIF, that we would still might want to pursue TIF as an avenue to recoup some of the city's costs and the EDA's costs for developing these properties, making them shovel-ready, especially because we're looking to sell them at $1 an acre. The last thing on there, as you'll see, is a number 4. This is not necessarily something we're looking for action of from the council. It's more of just kind of a policy along staff, is that we will be requiring a deposit from any developer to fund all costs associated with the sale and development of the property. So that's going to be working with our bond counsel or other financial advisors for creation of developers agreements, subsidy agreements, and or TIF agreements. If you have any questions, I'll send Tyler Glenn here with Bladak, has been working with us closely as well, and he can answer or add into anything that I missed out.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, council. Just one comment is that, the city no longer has a listing agent for this property, so it's certainly an important thing when we consider this, because, when we drop the price from $62,225 an acre down to $1 an acre, there isn't a commission-based agent working on this property. So, this is at the discretion of the city, certainly at this point. The properties are listed on Bladek's website. I know they are also out on the city's website. We haven't had a viable developer out there in close to 5 years now. So this is certainly an opportunity for us to gain some traction and hopefully move this property along. As David mentioned, this is a shovel-ready certified site, so there are 36 of them in the state of Minnesota. Right now, more than half of them are listing out their property for $1 an acre. And it is based on, because there is TIF available. When the TIF becomes available, the city can access that TIF and recoup some of their costs related to that. So it's just, those are a couple of important points to note with this, and we'd certainly take any questions that the council may have at this point.
I have a question. So if we make this agreement, the city still owns the land, right? And the city will continue to own the land until the city decides to not own the land anymore. What if nothing happens for 4 years, total new city council shows up, the EDA comes with this agreement, says, hey, 4 years ago you said this was a good idea, now you have to give us this land.
And that was certainly a discussion point at the EDA, was to put a sunset on this. And so as to determine a period of time that this motion that the council would make tonight would have a sunset date attached to it. And I think that's something that should be considered for that purpose alone.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to be able to put something on it as you would with, I think if you look at a listing agent, they're contractually bound for a certain period of time. And I think this is something that could certainly benefit us and for future councils moving forward, is if there is a sunset date attached to it.
And part of the discussion that was had at the EDA around that, it wasn't in the EDA's motion, but I did add that into the agenda request, was that part of the other idea benefit of doing a sunset is also so that should we, whatever the time period that the council should decide that sunset would be, then obviously we can come back, and we can come back before the sunset date too and just go, is this working?
Yeah, so the city has, the city has nothing. The taxpayers have $5 million in the ground in these 2 industrial lots.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we give them away for $1? You said we have TIF as an option, and maybe we would use TIF.
Correct.
But would the city council be seeing the TIF documents before transferring the land on what we would be projected to recoup for the taxpayers who already invested $5 million here?
I think that, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's an excellent point. I think there's, as these agreements are getting drafted, we would first have to have a developer come to the table. If a developer comes to the table and we can draft those documents, a developer agreement along with the business subsidy and along with the TIF documentation, I think then it could be brought before this council and then you could make the decision to transfer the land. I think that's reasonable.
And I think that would be important for the city, because while increasing tax base is very important, and while new jobs is reasonably important, I think, not throwing good money after bad is just as important. And we already put $5 million of other people's money.
Correct.
None of us have any skin into this. The taxpayers put in, well, we all pay a little bit of taxes.
Right.
But there's $5 million that none of us paid more than a few $100 for, that we should be, our goal as a city should be getting that $5 million back. So I'll even go back to the EDA meeting, 2 EDA meetings ago. It was mentioned by somebody who spoke that, and if we can get rid of all this land, we get to go build more shovel-ready sites. Well, I don't agree with that. If we get rid of this land, we say good riddance. Shovel-ready sites aren't worth $1 an acre.
No.
So we shouldn't be giving this land away assuming we're going to go build more land, because we shouldn't be building shovel-ready sites. The market has spoken. They're worthless. We have some white elephants on our hands. What do we do to get rid of them? I think this is a good plan. But I do think a priority for the city, along with building tax base, but TIF ain't building tax base.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And building jobs is recouping the cost the taxpayers already paid into it. Kelly?
Tyler addressed my thoughts on how this process would work. It starts with a developer ready to purchase, and moves into a business subsidy agreement, which includes transferring the property, the sale price of $1 has already been negotiated and agreed upon tonight if it passes. And the TIF particulars are agreed upon. They might be different for each.
Are they agreed upon before the transfer of the property?
It's all part of the business subsidy, so I would say it's all simultaneous. The transfer doesn't happen unless, now this is my vision, doesn't happen unless the business subsidy happens. The business subsidy happens, which may or may not, but in this particular scenario does include TIF to allow for discussion. It might be a different business subsidy agreement that may allow the city to recoup some of its investment. It may not. There might be, I could foresee a circumstance with a massive employer that we want. And as you just said, we're into it for the money we got. Now, we may want to take it anyway. We had discussions earlier where we were going to give property away. Not for $1, but give it away. under the circumstances that we received a large employer. It didn't work out, but these are all things that would happen, I'll say simultaneous, not within a second, but within a matter of time as part of the business subsidy. That's the way I would see it.
And you see the discussion taking place at the city council as well as at EDA. You don't see this agreement just saying, EDA, do what you want, we're not going to pay attention.
I don't see it that way at all. The EDA is the advisory board. I think that works out well. I think the EDA has opportunities to discuss at a different level than the council does.
Connie?
The city would have to approve the TIF district,
Yeah.
so it would have to go through the city council.
And
I'm talking about transferring land. I'm talking about knowing the TIF district before transferring land.
And maybe we don't transfer the land until the council feels comfortable with knowing what the business subsidy is. So it's not like it has to happen automatically if it comes to you. I mean, I think you can put,
I wouldn't be comfortable transferring the land until we knew what was going in there, because if we had an opportunity to give 40 acres away and somebody was going to provide 30 jobs, I wouldn't be all that interested.
I just want to reiterate, maybe it's just to make a point, is that the fourth item that's in this document is a deposit that's going to be required by a developer. So if we put this deposit out there, this deposit is we're requiring the deposit to move forward with drawing up these documents. So if we're that far, we're creating a bit of a challenge, because what happens is that if we are asking a developer to give us $10,000 to start creating business subsidy agreements, developer agreements, all of this TIF agreements, all of this, those documents are going to be created. We are going to be creating a cost. So there is going to be an expense related to that, which the developer is covering. So we're going to put that, essentially, we're putting a little bit of the cart in front of the horse on some of this, just because I'm saying it's going to come back to you with documents already drawn up, expenses already paid. So by accepting the items as they're listed here, it's saying that you are approving basically the body staff to go forward.
We're conceptually approving the EDA marketing our land for $1 an acre.
And if I may, off of Alderman Bevan's comment about the EDA being the advisory committee, I think part of this idea here is that the EDA, I think, is doing that initial work on the front end, on working with the developer, to getting their idea before they take it to council for, we want to do the land. They're gonna, I think part of the idea of that EDA is that weed out on, is this a developer we actually want to work with?
Mr. Chair?
Okay, yeah, Annie?
So when this TIF district will not be designated as a TIF district until the point of sale, right? It's not that we have to do it now. We don't have to designate this as a TIF district.
Correct.
No, it would be based off of the project, and then based off of the project, depending on the size of the project, I'm just going to throw out an example, say there was going to be a phased project, and they're going to build one building this year, another building next year. What we can do is we can almost do, I guess I call them like pocket TIF districts, where we put a TIF district on the first building, and then we don't put a second TIF district until the second building goes up, because we only get this would be an economic development TIF district, which only lasts for 9 years. So we wouldn't want to be putting a district on blank land, because we're not going to really get much increment off of it. So we can wait until the further development and then put additional districts on it as it develops to get the maximum amount of increment we could gather.
And TIF districts have to be created, there has to be a need by either the developer, and in this case, obviously, the city, there would be a need to recoup some of this $5 million. So it has to meet a but-for clause, so there is language in place to make sure that if the TIF district is created, it's created based on need.
On need, okay. And Mr. Chair, is this for the Wright Street?
Both by FedEx and Wright Street.
Okay.
So, and to clarify, the FedEx, which is phase 4, so that east side of TC, those are the shovel-ready sites.
Okay.
Wright Street, we're including this in here, but it is not shovel-ready.
Those are the ones worth a dime a dozen, but they are worth significantly more than Wright Street.
Okay, so the FedEx is more expensive. Okay, and Wright Street does not have any infrastructure in it, does that?
A street.
Got a street.
A street, I mean, that's.
Water in a street.
Water
Water
and sewer, so it doesn't
but-
have all that expense.
But part of being a shovel-ready site is that they've been graded, there've been soil tests, there's,
Oh, okay.
you know,
I'm
all
s-
those extra things, they're done. Someone could buy it today and start digging tomorrow,
Okay,
kind of an
thank you,
idea.
thank you for letting
So
me.
I'm willing to take a motion to,
As Chair of EDA, I'd like to bring back the thought that if the council authorizes and transfers the land to the EDA before the TIF district is formed, et cetera, the reason we transfer it to the EDA and rather the city is because we have the clawback. With that agreement, we can state, if there's not the financing, if there's not the plans, et cetera, they don't follow through, we can pull it back rather than let it go at that dollar.
but we give it to them for $1 so they can use it as leverage
Well,
with bank
that's-
financing.
Yes, but that, all these things have to come together under the EDA's purview. So we get to go and actually, the EDA, with the council's blessing, get to go and make the deal work. So we don't get the cart in front of the horse, so we can actually work the deal and try to get the whole thing done.
So, Mr. Chair, is the EDA working as like a real estate? Would they be, are
Well-
they gonna be the marketing?
I think it'd be a Blade Deck EDA comment, mostly be Tyler
Yep.
pounding the
So
paper
you,
for us.
so it would be, we don't have.
Sandwich board.
He'll just stand out there with the sandwich board. New
But
water
again,
tower.
it's-
Dollar, land.
We don't have a contract with a agent, so
No,
you
we do
guys
not.
would handle, you would hold that, okay.
Yeah, I'd take a motion to conceptually approve the outline laid out in this memo for 4 years.
Mr. President.
4 years is the sunset is 4.
Years.
Yeah.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is, Dave, you
No,
had
I
some
was
more?
just gonna add, you added the 4 years at the end, so that's all I wanted, was the sunset. So we're
Perfect.
good.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We are going to develop some industrial lots.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, Tyler.
Thank you.
Next item is final reading of proposed ordinance 1500. David?
Yep, Mr. President, so let's go quick again. This is the final reading for ordinance 1500. That's to rezone 11349 Easy Street from R1A Single Family Residential to R1 Single Family Residential. So with this, we'll just need the, this will be the two-parter of first the reading, whether or not the council wishes to hold the reading or dispense with the reading, and then a motion to approve the ordinance if the council so chooses.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to hold the final reading and dispense with the reading of ordinance, proposed ordinance number 1500 of the rezoning of 11349 Easy Street.
Second.
We have a motion, and Stunek woke up for a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, this will be a voice vote, right? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Looking for adoption of the ordinance.
I'll make the motion to adopt the ordinance for number 1500, the rezoning on Easy Street. I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Bevins. This one will, is there any discussion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Stunek?
Yes.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Bevins?
Yes.
Bedell?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Lampert?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. All right. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, public forum, time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the council. Time limits may be imposed or they may not be imposed. Let's see. Is anybody here for public forum? Is anybody here for public forum? Is anybody here for public forum? Seeing nobody here for public forum, we'll close that at 10:11. 12, staff reports. Anything new since the packet? We're going to have to snake around the room for a few months, huh? Start with Jim.
Mr. President, just a couple of notes. I'm listening to the room, and it to me, sitting here, it sounds pretty good. There are times when I think we're going to have to get used to using these microphones perhaps a little closer, and because of the echoes in the room that are different from our chambers, maybe slow down a little bit. but that will come along with practice. And I also neglected to, and I'll follow up with a letter to the Crow Wing County Board of Commissioners, thank them specifically for the cooperative effort that they've given us to be able to use their chambers for these coming months. So good move, went smoothly. And this evening, I congratulate you on a good council meeting.
Thank you. David?
I have nothing, Mr. President.
Connie?
Nothing to report.
Kim? Sean?
Oh, somebody say something. I mean, it's only 11
Corky,
o'clock.
Joe.
It's past my bedtime.
My God.
All right, that brings us to council member reports, and we'll start over here and end with the mayor.
All right. So just a heads up for people, the Water Tower Committee is kind of moving into its next phase. We should hopefully be finding out about a grant that we applied for here soon. But coming to the council very soon, we're probably going to ask that we open up the committee again to try and get a flood of people in. We're kind of getting to the point where we need workers now. And so we want to open up the committee to as many people as humanly possible. We did it with a small group, but now we're looking to start expanding to try and get a bigger workflow so we can actually achieve some of these projects. So that will probably be coming to you at some point for approval.
Alderman Stunek.
I have nothing. And I'm still awake.
I guess the only thing I would say is had a great time this past Halloween. It was great to see so many people downtown for the downtown trick or treat. I know my wife and 2 kiddos were down there, and it was busy, so very cool. But other than that, nothing to add. Now that I'm on committees, I'm sure I will going forward. Thank you.
All I have to say is that our rental ordinance committee, we are in the licensing review right now, so we still meet twice a month, and we're doing an hour and a half now, so it's still moving along, and hopefully we'll be done.
Is Rick still on there?
Yes,
So you're not going to increase license fees?
we have, that's what we're finding out.
that's-
That's where we're at, that's where we're at.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I want to reiterate how Jim opened the meeting, and I just want to thank Crow Wing County for opening up their doors for us and letting us meet here for, I think, no cost, but at least low cost, right, for the next, no cost for the next 6 months or
Actually
longer.
paying us. Oh, wait.
And I really like their technology setup, and their microphones, except for the one on the podium, are pretty good.
These books behind you make you look really good.
I'm sure on YouTube,
Listen, click your button. I can see you right now. You look fantastic.
thank you. 10-second delay, though. You know how I looked 10 seconds ago. And then to reiterate what Tad said, just had Halloween this last week, and I want to thank both my neighborhood in Southeast Brainerd and Kelly's always overly generous neighborhood of North Brainerd for giving candy to probably over 1,000 kids again this year, like they do every year. It's just a fantastic neighborhood, grid system, sidewalks around the blocks, narrowish roads where there's cars parked, everybody's driving slow because they're scared they're going to hit a kid, and kids can walk across the street, walk on sidewalks. What a beautifully developed neighborhood, and what a generous community of people who live there. Thank you to Kelly's neighbors. That's all I have.
Tell them the truth, Kelly.
Was that you in the pink Power Ranger outfit?
He went there 4
Only
times.
the first 3 times. And also, like, community ed for not taking day 1 student drivers down there on Halloween. We all avoided that because that's where we drive. 2 things. 1, hunt safely, hunt ethically, and good luck to everybody that's going afield this weekend and as they may. 2, I did talk to the library board at the last meeting, and the library is more than happy to accommodate anybody who wishes to use their computers to view our meetings. So.
This wasn't especially, do they know it's going to be 3 hours this week?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I am done.
Nothing to add. It's bedtime.
Mayor.
Typically, I don't give very many proclamations, but tonight I've got one that I feel is very, very important. The proclamation I'm going to make is, whereas Walter Straka fought on the Isle of Luzon in the Philippines as part of the 1st Tank Unit of the 194th Tank Battalion in the Far East before World War II, where his unit was ordered to surrender with a fall of Bataan on April 9, 1942. Whereas Walter Straka, the only Brainerd survivor, is one of only 5 Bataan March survivors still alive. Whereas Walter Straka endured 43 months in captivity under unimaginable conditions of deprivation and physical cruelty, whereas Walter Straka has dealt bravely with the nightmares from his experiences, has raised a family of 7, has succeeded in his life through hard work and determination, is an exemplary city and a role model, the city of Brainerd, myself as mayor, do hereby proclaim Monday, November 11th, 2019, to be Walter Straka Day in the city of Brainerd. Signed on this day, and I'll sign it on the November 11th at the memorial. It's not a memorial because he's still alive, so I guess I got to just say a proclamation for that. 2 other things I got to say about it is, if you're down at Rotary Park entrance, the arch is up. It's not finished yet, but the Rotary group has put up the thing. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to our city, probably the nicest entry to a park in probably 60 or 80 miles of here. And the next thing is, I'm old. I do remember when we remodeled City Hall 20-some years ago, and when they did it in, the City Hall moved into the Armory. I do remember a gutter running through the interior of the building, transferring the rainwater that was leaking through the roof. So our staff then, I do hats off to them. I only know one of them that is still working with it. That's Chris at the HR. Thank you very much to the county for allowing us to be here. And with that, I shut up.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.
You're still on
Yeah.
You're still on YouTube? You're still on YouTube?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I've met with them 2 more times
Sean
since
ran
then,
to go shut it
and
off.
my whole thing was